Welcome to the final video. My name is Daniel from Melio AI, and in this video I'm going to show you how to deploy your model to Highwind. Previously, we've containerized your model, made it compatible with Kserve, and ran inferences on it. But before we can deploy it, we need to understand the differences between a use case and an asset, as well as knowing how to create your own JSON schema. Lastly, we're going to go through the Highwind interface so that you are able to navigate through it. Alright, let's get started. To start deploying your models in Highwind, the general flow will be to experiment on the model, usually via Jupyter Notebooks, and then once you're happy with the model, we need to containerize the model with Docker. After that, push the image to Highwind, and then test the model by trying to get a response from it. When you log into Highwind for the first time, you'll notice that we have use cases and assets. A use case represents the specific problem or purpose that needs to be addressed. For instance, it could involve predicting house prices or detecting fraud, and use cases are composed of multiple assets. Now, assets form the building blocks of a use case. We have 4 asset types: the Docker repo, which contains the trained model ready for inference, the pipeline for the compute steps of a DAG, a model, and dataset. This modular approach with assets gives you more granular control of the use case, as you can swap out assets, version control them, and even share the same assets between different use cases. This also makes it very easy to reproduce a use case. Okay, so you might be thinking, I know JSON, I use it all the time. And I thought the same thing too, but actually the JSON schema is different to what we use all the time, the JSON object. What the JSON schema does is describe the JSON object. We use it to annotate and validate your JSON object, including data types, constraints, and structure. This will become clear with an example. Meet Bob, our basic JSON object. Okay, simple enough, we can see his name and age. But is that all there is about Bob? How do we know if there are other fields I can use, such as an address or telephone number? What is the minimum or maximum number of characters I can use in the name? Also, can the age be an integer, float, or string? As we can see, just by looking at the JSON object, it does not really tell us much. Let's create a JSON schema to describe the JSON object and avoid any confusion. Here, we are going to specify and describe the constraints, data types, and the structure of Bob. First, we give it a type of object, as in something that has key value pairs. So our JSON object. Title is used to give a short description or purpose of the schema, and your description is the longer version of it. Then we have properties, which is where we define our keys and their values. Within name and age properties, we can see its data type, description, and constraints. In required, we can see that name and age are not optional. And since we don't want any other properties besides name and age, additional properties have been set to false. Now, by looking at this JSON schema, I know exactly what is valid for our JSON object. Let's look at a more complex example. Here, we have product ID and product size. Again, I don't really know what it means and what is valid for this JSON object. What is the product? Is L the only size available? Let's see in the JSON schema. Now we can see that this product is about t-shirts. Within properties, we can see that the ID is a string that follows a regex pattern that has a maximum length of 36 characters. In product size, I can see the different sizes available. Let's look at the new key, $schema. The value is pointing to the 2020 December specification of the JSON schema. Similar to Docker Compose, JSON schema has different versions of a specification. This helps the validator understand the rules and conventions used in that specific version. Looking at the JSON schema documentation, the versions are called drafts. The latest version is 2020 December, which is the one we are using. If you want to see more examples or understand how validation works, please refer to the documentation. As a recap from the Kserve video, we containerized our Iris Classifier Model. I'm going to rebuild the image for a step-by-step view of the deployment. Now that the image is ready, I'm going to go check if the image is present. Great, now we can create our first asset. Now remember, a use case is made up of one or many assets. So before we can create our first use case, we need to create our asset. From here, in the drop-down menu of asset type, I'm going to select Docker repository since we are working with Docker images. Next, I'm going to give the Docker repository a name. You can give your asset a cover image if you like. If not, the default image will be used. Now in the drop-down menu of Docker image type, since we have created a predictor, select Kserve predictor. For the description, this must be written in Markdown format. Once you have typed out your description, you can preview what it looks like in the Markdown preview tab. I'm now going to give it a better description. When you're ready, click on Create Docker Image Repository. Now you'll see the instructions on how to push your image to Highwind. Don't worry, it looks like a lot, but it's mostly just copy and pasting into your terminal. First, we'll authenticate with Highwind by retrieving the authentication token. 2 is only needed if you haven't built your image yet, which we have, so we're going to skip this part. But please keep note of the placeholder name. You need to replace it with your actual image name. Once the image is ready, we're going to give the image a new tag that is usable for Highwind. Now that we've retagged the image, we can push the tag image into Highwind. For Windows users, if you encounter authentication issues, please refer to the FAQ where we provide a workaround for Docker. Now I'm going to take all those commands from the previous window and just paste them into my terminal. So first I'm going to authenticate with Docker. The second step is to build the image if you haven't already. And again, just a reminder to please replace the placeholder name with your actual image name. If you've forgotten what your image name is, just use docker image ls and you can see the image name. Now I'm going to retag the image so that it can be pushed into Highwind. Make sure you use the real name instead of the placeholder name. Then I use docker ls just to check again. Everything looks okay, so let's push the tagged image. Now that we have our asset, we can start creating our use case. In case you need the push commands again, just open the asset and then scroll down to push commands. Okay, so let's create our first use case. Here, we're going to give the use case a name as well as give it a cover image if you want to. Then in the description, you can describe what the use case is about and importantly, provide an example payload. This example payload will be used to run inferences. I'm going to use the same input from before. Now we need to attach our asset to this use case. So click on the Add Asset button. A drop-down menu will appear. Just select the asset that we pushed earlier. Once you've added it, you'll see an asset card appear in the use case. You can have multiple cards appear within your use case. Now that we have the assets, let's click on Deploy. Here we can see that the JSON schema has already been provided for you. Since we are using the K-serve inference request, we can be sure that everyone will have the same JSON schema. At the bottom, we need to select the version of our image. When we pushed the image at the time, it had a tag of latest, so we only have latest available. So let's select that one. As a side note, you might not be able to select the image. If this happens, please refresh your browser and it should appear. When you're ready, click on Deploy. Once everything is green, your deployment is successful. Okay, let's run an inference with our use case. Here you can see the compute and schema buttons. Click on schema to see the schema again, and then compute to run an inference. I'm going to copy the example payload provided and paste it into the hosted inference API. Then I'm going to click on compute and get a result. Great, we have our result, so everything's working as expected. For the Zinti competition, we have provided a dataset for you contained within the use case parallel dieuler. This dataset is an asset of parallel dieuler. To get this asset for yourself, we need to buy this use case. Let's open the use case and inspect the asset. Then go to the purchase button and purchase the use case. You'll now see that parallel dieuler will appear in my use cases. This means that you now own any assets that are included with the use case. Now let's create a new use case. I'm going to add the dataset asset as well as the image asset that we created earlier. Now the Iris Classifier image is not going to work with this dataset. I'm just uploading it as an example. You will need to containerize the model that will work with the dataset. Once you've added all your assets, just click on Deploy and then you're ready to go. I hope that this video series has been helpful for you. And as always, if you ever get stuck, please let us know. We at Melio are always more than happy to help. Otherwise, best of luck with the competition. I know you're going to do great. Alright, that's it from me. Goodbye for now.